Gone are the days when articles were written by adults. Now what we get, especially in the dying age of the mainstream press and mainstream digital outlets, we get articles that were meant to be essays or dissertations by teenagers. No offense to them, but they are not the things that should be paid for. And not only do we get that, I mean, Vice is a very good example of that. Not only do we get that, but we also get just these painted pictures that aren't quite the whole truth. Spun narratives, I suppose. Here we have someone who apparently is a professor. Well, Donald Zuckerberg and a Professor Helen Morales turning in their end of semester dissertation to the BBC and getting paid money. What the ancient Greeks can teach us about Greta Thunberg trolls. Now, what you're clearly going to see here is people who don't really grasp what the concept of a troll actually is. It can be a bit subjective, but trolling is kind of known, well, by the people that know, to be something different. There's a difference between online abusers and trolls. Trolls are wind-up merchants. People who just go around being mean online are just twats. There's a big difference. It may appear that the trolling of women is an unpleasant byproduct of the internet era. Obviously, there's the whole women slant here because, of course, it's far worse for women to be trolled than men, even though women are apparently really strong and powerful, yet they are also weak and feeble. That's not what I'm saying. That's the picture they paint constantly. It's a very confusing time we live in. We live in a time where black is white, white is black. The sun rises in the west and sets in the east. It's all fucked up. In fact, the tactics used are remarkably similar to those employed in ancient times, especially if you compare the trolling of Greta Thunberg and the way ancient Greeks used to treat hysterical women. Well, the treatment of hysterical women is an interesting concept, but they are about to elaborate, so let me not prolong it. Girls and women who speak out or express opinions are often subjected to abuse online, intended to intimidate and silence them. So are men, in equal measures. But there's more of a focus on women, because it seemed to be meaner. That's a fact. And kids, it seemed to be even meaner than that. And the marginalised, even meaner. A marginalised female kid, the meanest of the mean. That's the way it is. That's the way it's perceived. But the fact is, if you build up this persona of Greta Thunberg and have her pointing fingers at delegates at the UN and screeching at them, she's on the front line. You don't put someone on the front line and then complain that they're getting shot at. It's a ridiculous thing to do. Climate activist Greta Thunberg is a prime example of this. One thing to notice is, of course, it's subjected to online abuse, intended to intimidate and silence them. Well, trolling isn't about abuse. Trolling is winding up. It's a big difference. And a lot of people who abuse, if you want to call it abuse, or people that do wind-ups, people that create memes, people that write mean stuff, aren't doing it to intimidate and silence people. They're doing it to get a rise out of people. And it is as old as the internet era, because I can remember, the young days of the internet and being at college and friends telling me about chat rooms. I'd never heard of a chat room before. I didn't know what the fuck it was. And they said, I didn't have internet at home. I don't think they did either, but they knew about chat rooms. And they used to go into chat rooms and they said they do something called punishing. And what they do is they just wind up people saying the most mean and horrendous stuff with, being completely anonymous about it, because you can get away with it doing that, And then they say when it reached a certain point, they really punish them. And I'm talking saying horrendous stuff to people, because that's humanity. That's the level we're at. That's what we are. So, that's different. But it was to wind them up. They didn't want to silence them or intimidate them. They just wanted to wind them up. They're wind-up merchants. So climate activist Greta Thunberg is a prime example of this. As the teenager continues to speak out about the impending environmental problems caused by climate change, she is the subject of greater and greater amounts of abuse. And abuse these days is very subjective, unfortunately. Criticism is considered abuse. Because look here, she has repeatedly been called hysterical and mentally ill and has been the target of social media death threats. Now, everyone knows death threats ain't cool. That is abuse. But being called hysterical, when you have a girl in front of the UN, let's say you have an articulate girl who's up there as they're going, this is causing problems. This is bad. This is what's happening. What are you going to do about it? That's fine. But when you have someone going, you ruined my future. You've destroyed. You've killed everyone. I mean, she's one of the long list. Have you seen the videos of the ones that are outside, like literally screeching? It's like, that is hysterical behavior. It's the definition of hysterical behavior. And mentally ill, well, she's spoken openly, and other people have spoken openly about her mental health problems. So to say someone's being hysterical is subjective, and mentally ill can be subjective. If someone comes out and says, I'm a schizophrenic, say, well, you're mentally ill. How dare you? So I don't call that, it's not really abuse, is it? Of pointing out stuff, of going, well, that seems a bit hysterical what you're doing there. You're acting a bit hysterical. And they try to paint it like it's something that men use to shut women down. It's like, no, if someone's acting hysterical, you have every right to go, yo, you're being a bit hysterical, whether they're male, female, or the in-between. If something looks like it's hysterical, it might just be hysterical. And therefore, and to label it, you're talking about intimidation and silencing. Well, it works both ways. If you say that people calling someone hysterical or mentally ill and saying, this is abuse, that is a way to silence their dissent. So therefore, what you're talking about, the hysterical woman myth. Well, there's no myth about hysterical women or hysterical men. They exist. We all know one. While these online platforms are relatively new, the threats themselves are not. For those of us working in ancient studies, here we go. It is easy to spot a pattern here stretching back across millennia. I don't think there is. As far back as 2,500 years ago, in ancient Greece, girls and women were controlled in similar ways. Greta has become for many an icon of resistance, of speaking truth to power. To some. In this, she resembles the mythical Greek heroine Antigone. I'm going to say Antigone or Antigone. Did you say Antigone? Antigone. We'll go with Antigone. Antigone is only in her mid-teens. Don't cuss me out for getting this wrong. I don't care. In her mid-teens when she rebels against her uncle Creon, the increasingly tyrannical king of Thebes, or Thebes, who knows. Like Greta, she risks her safety. Okay, this is where the parallels must end, my friend. Risks her safety. See, going up against a tyrannical king in ancient Greece is a bit different to being a pampered climate princess and sailed around the world and to confront fawning politicians. It's not quite the same thing. I don't think BP are going to take a hit out on Greta Thunberg at any point soon, and refuses to be cowed by powerful politicians or by what anyone else thinks. And like Greta, Antigone's strength, or Antigone's, who knows, is undermined by misogynist beliefs, as Creon claims that she is insane. Well, it's a good way to shut down your detractors, is to call them crazy. This part of the myth represents a common view at the time, one which still receives airtime today. I see what you're trying to do, but I'm not buying it. An ancient Greek medical text tells us that girls like Antigone, who were old enough to be married but had not done so, were mentally ill, right? They were thought to be hysterical, and the idea that originates from ancient Greece. These young women were also thought to be too gloomy, obsessing about death. Well, that's a good parallel, because she is obsessing about death and is very gloomy in her rhetoric. But where's the similarities of, she wasn't married and therefore was turned mentally ill, and that's not a thing now. And in ancient Greece, I can imagine that being a thing, because it's 2,500 years ago, where they had completely wacky beliefs. Okay, they had a god of thunder and shit back then. I'm not in Greece, I'm getting all this mythology mixed up. That's because it's all nonsense, isn't it? Anyway, One might imagine an ancient Greek sarcastically commenting that Antigone seemed like a very happy girl looking forward to a bright and wonderful future. I see what you did there. Well done. That was really clever. That was so clever. Because you're a cleverer person than me. Because you wrote an essay and sold it to the BBC. I mean, I've got some essays lying around. You know. Misogyny in the social media age. Fast forward 2,000 years. Whoop. And while misogyny may be culturally hardwired, that's subjective, the relatively recent creation of social media has facilitated it in particularly damaging ways. How so? These platforms have allowed anonymous attacks and enabled campaigns targeted against individual women. It's not the same as the way women would have been persecuted like back in the day and back in the day, you know? Do you know what I mean? You know, it's not the same, is it? Women in the public sphere can now expect to be bombarded with memes and threats on social media by a brigade of online trolls. It's like, what? You can't make these comparisons to ancient Greece. Bombarded with memes and threats on social media. Do you know how whack that sounds to certain people? Do you know how like pathetic that sounds? Going, oh, I've been bombarded with memes. It's like, you know, remember when Joe Budden, if you don't know Joe Budden the rapper, when he got confronted by some Drake fans and then he chased after him, all those classic memes on Joe Budden running. Joe Budden was bombarded with memes. Is Joe Budden in danger? Was Joe Budden in danger from the memes? Hell, Drake himself, after he released that Hotline Bling video in his polo neck. The amount of memes that came out of that. Was he in trouble? Were those memes dangerous to Drake? If someone memes the crap out of you, it means you've made it, doesn't it? Women in the public sphere, anyway, this sometimes involves having personal information such as their addresses and phone numbers published, a tactic known as doxing. Well, I'm glad you know what doxing is. And doxing isn't considered cool by many people. It's kind of a big no-no, isn't it? Most people can agree that doxing is not cool. So what's your point? Over time, and I've seen people calling for the doxing of people they consider to be trolls. Whereas doxing is just a no-no, isn't it? Is it or isn't it? Because some people will advocate for doxing. They will. You probably advocate for doxing yourself, from the sounds of it. Over time, these trolls have only become more experienced and sophisticated in their use of social media to threaten women who speak and frighten others into silence. They said it works both ways. If you label someone an abuser, you say they are abusing people because they're stating what they think are facts or they're stating their opinion, and you silence them by calling them an abuser, you're doing exactly the same thing. You can't have it both ways, I'm afraid. These attacks are sometimes inflamed by racism, anti-Semitism, and transphobia. Now they're just throwing everything in. Going, oh, it's everything. You know, it's a big cocktail of abuse. So what's the solution? One approach is to refuse to turn a blind eye to attackers and engage with them instead. Which is something I do, but like I'm not high profile. And I think as you'll learn, when you become high profile, you'll engage less with trolls because it's a complete waste of time. All they're trying to do is wind you up. All right? You know, I've been on stream sometimes, and I had someone just constantly typing Trump, 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 Trump. Like just continuously typing Trump in the chat, you know. Because they were doing that because they thought it would wind me up. Well, it clearly didn't. But it was like, you know, that's what people do. I'm not going to engage with someone writing Trump, 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 because I don't, well, for one, I don't really care. And then I've had people try to write mean things, and I've gone after them, and I've slewed them. But I've got, you know, I don't get that much. You know, I'm not big, am I? So, for me, it kind of benefits me in the beginning to engage with trolls. You know, it can boost algorithms on certain platforms, and you know it can have its benefits. But in the long run, a troll is just there to wind you up. It's just there to wind you up. So why are you going to engage? So there's probably no point engaging with them. You know, unless you want to go down the Tommy Robinson path, which is originally the Jay and Silent Bob path. What I mean by that is, if you've seen Jay and Silent Bob Strikes Back, these guys write mean things about them on the internet because of their comic book they got or something, and then when they get a load of money, they just go around the world kicking their heads in of all these little teenage punks who chat shit online, everyone that's spoken mean to them. Tommy Robinson actually took this into real life. I've seen 3 videos of him. One was a guy who told him to go kill himself, and then he confronted him at a pub. Another was a journalist, and he went round his house late at night. And I think another one was a journalist, or was someone at the Quilliam Foundation, something like that. And then he went into their offices, so they were talking smack online. So you could go that route if you want, if you're really, he was a pioneer of that, I suppose. Anyway, this is the approach taken by classics professor Mary Beard, who was affectionately called the Troll Slayer by the New Yorker magazine. I've never heard about this. I remember the Mary Beard situation and the horrendous thing that someone posted about her, but I don't remember her ever being labelled a troll slayer. So this is interesting. In one notorious incident, when a 20-year-old university student tweeted graphic sexual slurs at Professor Beard, one of her supporters recognised him and offered to inform his mother about his behaviour. When asked by the BBC what she would say to him, she replied, "I'd take him out for a drink and smack his bottom." The troll slayer, everyone. She slayed him. Slayed. Murked. Bunned up. Binned off. Slewed him. But even if we could identify all online abusers, Professor Beard's approach does not necessarily seem practical or desirable. Think of the time, money and energy it would take. Well, I'm glad you came to that conclusion, the sensible conclusion. Is troll slaying the answer? The other tactics involve unifying against trolls or cutting them off altogether. A new hashtag Team Muskox, and that is niche, encourages social media users to support women who speak out about climate change online by boosting positive interactions and reporting, muting, or blocking abusive responses. Or just wasting your time, as I like to call it. The phrase refers to the practice of musk oxen who form a circle around vulnerable members of the herd to protect them. Protect them from what? Words? Come on, man. You constantly live your life online and you don't feel safe on there. You've got to readdress yourself, haven't you? Do you know what I mean? You need to, reevaluate your position in the world, haven't you? Why is my life like this? You really do. There's too much stuff. For you to not feel safe in a virtual space, you got a problem. Maybe it is a symptom of our times. I think that's what needs addressing here. Not making comparisons with ancient Greece and Greta Thunberg. They're totally missing the bloody point here. There's a mass spread social contagion mental illness. Social media platforms themselves have also attempted to tackle the problem by implementing stricter harassment policies and restricting the accounts of influential trolls. Who are these influential trolls? Probably, I don't know, Milo Yiannopoulos or something like that. This often leads to complaints that freedom of speech is being limited. These objections go to the core values of modern society. How can we preserve the freedom of speech while creating an internet where future Gretas won't be subjected to so much abuse? Oh, didn't. Come on. Besides, deplatforming alone may not be enough to combat the misogyny ingrained in every level of our society. Good God, you love the modern world. Anyway, freedom of speech versus social responsibility. The ancient Greeks might be helpful here. Oh, great. Back to ancient Greece we go. They too prized freedom of speech. They had the word parrhesia, I don't know, which is not quite the same concept as ours, but includes the key idea that anyone can speak frankly. However, it was intended to be practiced alongside another core value, eidos. Eidos essentially means seeing yourself as a social being who is connected to your fellow human beings. It means having respect towards others. So freedom of speech for the ancient Greeks would have encouraged robust political debate, but combined with a sense of respect. This would have meant that anonymously attacking women or sending them pornographic slurs would not have been socially acceptable. Well, harassing women and sending pornographic slurs isn't socially acceptable. But people will do it because they'll think it's funny. You know? I mean, look at the greatest troll of our times, 50 Cent. I mean, there is no limits to what he will do in the realms of trolling. You know, are we going to turn on 50 Cent and all the great joy he's brought us? Oh no. It's all subjective. This is the problem. Imagine a future where children are brought up with a sense of ADOS, of greater connectivity and awareness of their social responsibilities. Social media can help here. It doesn't have to be the only tool of toxic masculinity. Oh, for goodness sake. Toxic masculinity. Here we go. Put all the talking points in there, why don't you? If you want to teach children about social responsibility, consequences of actions, but it's also like we all have to function together, and it's all not me, which is something that's kind of lacking in the first place. I think the narcissistic aspects of social media has you know had a very big effect. I think that's something that needs to be addressed in your weird essay. The Greeks have another lesson for us too. It is that there's always an alternative ending to the story. The Antigone myth that most people know ended in tragedy for Antigone and for Creon. But there was another version of the myth in which Antigone survived, married, and had a child. The child, of course, symbolizes the future. A different outcome is always possible. We just have to change the script. Well done for not saying anything at all. So what were the solutions that they came up with? I don't know, write a hashtag about ox. Do you know what the solution is? Just ignore it. I've said this before, and someone wrote an essay of a comment under a video going, "Oh, it's not so easy to ignore. It's like, yeah, it's not easy. It's not easy to ignore stuff, but that's all you've got to do. When you think, just don't think about it and ignore it, you can eventually condition yourself. People go, oh, it's not easy. I never said anything's easy, but just do it. Many things are hard work. It's easy. Being Greta Thunberg is easy. It's easy. It's not difficult. It's very easy. Look at the situation. Look how it's propped up. Come on. You think it's difficult to be doing that? Imagine if it was the reverse. Imagine the reverse Greta Thunberg going around speaking out against climate change lunatics. About these climate change protesters are like doomsday cults. Imagine the child going around speaking out against them and how it would be for them. That's not easy. Think about it. Come on, you got Hollywood and about 90% of the mainstream media behind you, governments, you know, all introducing these taxes and laws. Like, you want to be the kid that goes out and speaks out against them? You want to talk about speaking truth to power? Yeah, you are right. We do have to change the script. There's a much better script lying out there. It's not the life story of Greta Thunberg, that's for sure. There is a hero that is yet to emerge, or heroine, whichever you like.